Max, picture this. You robbed a bank
Okay, always dreamed of doing that. Still looking to put a team together. Let's go, Dave.
with a ragtag group of extreme leftist radicals.
Okay, this feels a little politically wrought for our times. Is the FCC listening?
And now the federal government is after you and your daughter.
I don't have Dave, what are you talking about?
I'm talking about the movie everyone's talking about, one battle after another. Let's go to the movies. Welcome to Picture This, the podcast where we examine the weekly box office and ask, what do movie-going trends say about American culture?
Movie-going is an American passion, but it's hit uncertain times. So mostly, we're here to give you all the reasons to go see a movie in theaters the way they were meant to be seen.
I'm your host, Dave. Over the last 10 years, I've worked for a filmmaker, an agent, and at a movie studio in movie marketing.
And I'm Max, a screenwriter and son of an independent movie theater owner who has spent his whole life in love with the movies.
Today's episode, we're going to be talking about One Battle After Another, the newest film by one of the premier auteur filmmakers of our generation, Paul Thomas Anderson, PTA. We're not only going to be looking at the film and its box office performance, but at PTA's history at the box office, what this film means for him, and which of his films makes Max the grumpiest.
I have a super clear answer to this, so I'm ready for
Ooh.
that one.
But first, let's talk about the state of the biz.
All right, the state of the biz. This week's box office at the top is our subject, One Battle After Another. Had a $22 million opening, which was slightly higher than anticipated, hitting just about $50 million worldwide, but we'll get into what that all means a little bit later. Coming in at number 2 is Gabby's Dollhouse. This is a movie based on a very popular kids show. Dave, have you seen Gabby's Dollhouse?
Wait, who's Gabby? What's a
Yeah.
Gabby? What's a dollhouse?
That's kinda how I felt about it. So evidently this is a DreamWorks animation show. It's a mix of live action and animation. It's been on Netflix for a few years, and it's from the people who did Blue's Clues, or some of the
Ooh,
people, which was,
yep.
seminary for me and Dave. Now, the movie has an incredible cast. It's got Gloria Estefan, Kristen Wiig, Jason Mantzoukas, and, like, a bunch of other comedians, including, like, weirdly, a lot of SNL people. It had a $13.5 million opening, $19 million worldwide on a $32 million budget.
Wow.
And
Okay.
my thought was like, it's kind of crazy that they spent $32 million on this, and I've never heard of it before. But anyhow, it seems like the fans really love it. It seems like it's pretty great that they would spend $32 million on this for the fans. And with the great reviews, it might carry over into something bigger. We know how these kids' films tend to track for a long time, so we'll see it. Coming in number 3, we haven't talked about this yet, but this is Demon Slayer Infinity Castle, which is been absolutely slaying the global box office. Dave, quick, tell me everything you know about Demon Slayer.
I know that it's an incredibly successful franchise globally that leans into the anime type of storytelling, which has grown in popularity. But if you ask me to name one character in Demon Slayer, I couldn't do it for you. Max,
Yeah, well,
enlighten me.
yeah, no, that makes 2 of us because like, I'm a casual like anime fan, but I've got buddies who are, based upon everything you just said, are just going. So
We're
I did
disappointing
just
our friends. Sorry,
Yeah,
guys.
just a little bit of research on this because it is one of the most significant films at the box office this year. Demon Slayer is based on a Japanese manga originally written in 2016.
Mhm.
Demon Slayer has now sold over 220 million copies worldwide, and it's about a special group of humans called Demon Slayers. Dave, guess what they do?
Slaying some demons?
Yeah, Dave, we know that, but how do they slay demons?
Whoa, with their wit and wisdom?
No, Dave, they have special swords and magic powers known as elemental breathing styles. Hello. Anyhow, the main character is a young boy, which makes this very YA, very coming of age. I know nothing else about it, but, based upon the animes that I've watched, this sounds very Japanese and probably appealing to the global youth for similar reasons that Buffy the Vampire Slayer was appealing to American youth about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But hey, I haven't watched a single minute of it, so don't quote me on any of that. More importantly, the manga has spawned 4 seasons of television, 4 movies, one of which was the highest grossing Japanese anime film of all time. Now, what's remarkable about this film is that it debuted at $74 million in the US and has so far grossed 118 in 3 weeks. We're looking at probably something like 5 or 6 million moviegoers going to see this movie so far. It's a foreign film.
Yeah.
I remember when Parasite came out, Parasite made around $53 million, and we were like, "Oh my god, the amount of financial success that this foreign film got." And now Demon Slayer has just wiped it clean. More importantly, it's going to outgrow Superman worldwide by the end of its run. Dave, like, is this a sign of the US's waning cultural influence abroad?
The US is still the biggest market technically in the world, which is partially why 30 years ago, why there was such a focus on it. But over the last 20, 30 years, other markets, other territories have slowly and slowly upped their own movie going to now where, taking China aside because they have their own government regulations, but China is the second biggest market. And short of that, the other markets around the world now cumulatively typically make up two-thirds of your box office,
Right.
whereas the US domestically makes up one-third. So
Yeah.
absolutely, man, there's been that trend going for quite a long time. And this is such a great reflection on where the market is moving.
It's kind of invigorating to think that foreign films are having such success in the United States because that's the purpose of art, to broaden our perspective, broaden our imagination. So I'm glad that the American public is so open to foreign films in a way that they didn't used to be. Next, we got The Conjuring, which we talked about a few weeks ago, but it has continued to cash in. It is at $161 million domestically, $435 million worldwide. After that, we got The Strangers 2, which is a horror franchise that is not hitting nearly as hard as The Conjuring. It had a $6 million debut. The next is Him, which was on my list for most anticipated movies of the fall, and it had a pretty lackluster debut, really mixed reviews. It is sitting at $20 million in 2 weeks, which is not terrible. I'm actually
Mhm.
not sure what the budget is, but just for kind of any movie, it means a pretty good amount of people went to go see it. But like I said, the reviews are super mixed.
I was also excited about it too, Max. So it was an interesting take on horror meets a sports movie,
Yeah.
and I'm still curious and excited to see it. I'm going to try to check it off the list
I'm gonna
soon.
try and get it when I get back to LA. I'm actually more interested in it because of how exactly the movie is being discussed as mixed. People are not coming straight out and saying it's bad. People are coming out and being like, "What did I just watch? I don't really know how I feel about that." My buddy even said to me, "I loved it, but I understand why people would hate it," which makes me think that it's probably a pretty prime Max Kessler movie that he'll like a lot. So we'll see what happens. Moving down the list, we got the Downton Abbey final movie. It's sitting at 77 million worldwide, which is okay, but I guess it was a $50 million budget. So will this make it a profitability? Does it need to make twice its budget to be profitable? It's not a knockdown, drag out hit, but probably a nice addition to the franchise in the kind of a similar way that the final Mission Impossible movie was
Hmm.
maybe not the biggest hit of the franchise, but it's still just added value to the thing as a whole. These movies
Hmm.
that are targeted toward older audiences, they'll make like $3-5 million for 10 weeks. And then suddenly
Yeah,
you're like, wait, how did that movie make $100 million? So we'll see.
I love it as at an AARP pace.
Speaking of long walks toward profitability, the next movie in our box office is The Long Walk. This is based on a Stephen King novel, kind of a dystopian future where these guys have to go on a really long walk and it's a torturous, horrifying journey. It's currently sitting at 35 million at the box office. People are mostly really liking it. It's about a $20 million budget. I think the word of mouth is going to help it reach that like 40, $50 million mark to be at least a break even or a success, and then maybe it'll have a pretty big life on VOD. Then we have The Big Bold Beautiful Journey, which had a very tiny, taciturn, not so pretty debut. It's sitting at a $13 million worldwide gross on its $45 million budget. I don't feel like it needs to make 90 million to break even because I feel like they kind of stopped marketing it. Audiences like are kind of saying what we had said about it, where they didn't go see it because they were like, "What is this?"
Yeah.
Which is kind of a marketing worst nightmare, right, Dave?
Totally agree. This is sad because on paper, this is a movie that Max and I especially would really support, which is an interesting filmmaker named Kogonada, and he's done two smaller budgeted dramas before. One called Columbus, and then another one called After Yang. Both critically acclaimed and deliberately paced movies. And then you get two giant movie stars with Margot Robbie and Colin Farrell. I think what is sad about this film only opening to under $5 million and now at around 13 is that there doesn't appear to be a floor on movies nowadays because of, I think, audiences having so many other options. there is no limit to how bad it can get, which is such a sad thing to say. Um, but my take is just that this very interesting filmmaker, from a cinephile's perspective, is from a marketer's perspective not really in alignment with the big studio system. His filmmaking, Kogonada's approach, is just more deliberately paced, and it's hard to get people excited for things that don't evoke a sense of urgency. And
Yeah.
this particular filmmaker just doesn't seem to bring that.
And I'll say, like, from what I read in Letterboxd about people who did see the movie, like, people who have seen it don't know how to talk about it. And they're not saying it's bad, but I don't know if it finds an audience down the road. It might just be a movie that missed the mark, because some movies miss the mark.
We'll keep an eye on this in the next couple weeks and see if there's new life when it comes to streaming. But Margot Robbie, in her next movie called Wuthering Heights, she'll be across from another handsome star, and that'll come out in February. And in their early marketing materials, looks like it has that sense of urgency, that sense of excitement, that sense of sexiness. That I don't know if that's just the lane that American moviegoers much rather see that version than this more thoughtful, deliberate approach to a film.
Wuthering Heights' trailer has been so effective that just because we mentioned it on the fall preview, I had people tell me that their most anticipated of not the fall is Wuthering Heights.
Never underestimate the power of like a really good trailer and some sexiness with two stars. And I think
Yeah.
that's maybe what people had hoped for Big Bold Beautiful Journey on paper. You hear cool director, two sexy stars, hopefully a lot of great chemistry between them equals appeal, and this one just didn't have it, and maybe Wuthering Heights will.
All right, Dave. Well, what do you got? You got some news on the DGA and
Yeah, yeah, it was announced a week or so ago. Christopher Nolan is now the new head of the DGA. He ran unopposed. Christopher Nolan, many would argue, has become the king of Hollywood. After several years of making successful box office films and then capping it 2 years ago with the success of Oppenheimer, which
the
uh,
success of Oppenheimer is just bananas. Like,
it
it's a biopic about a scientist, and it made like $1 billion. And
even the doubters of Christopher Nolan were quieted with the success of Oppenheimer. Exactly to your point of doing what has become more and more rare in Hollywood, which is making an Oscar award-winning film that also makes $1 billion, is
yeah,
now so rare. And this is just another step to crown him as the king of Hollywood. Nolan said it's one of the greatest honors of his career. My only comment is that he will probably be able to use his cachet to advocate for other filmmakers. The DGA represents about 20,000 people, and the previous president, Leslie Linka Glatter, I know nothing about her, but I think it's one thing if you're a studio executive getting a call from the president of DGA, Leslie Linka Glatter, butchering her. It's one thing if you
yeah.
get a
But you're
call
also
asking,
you're also like really making your point in
yeah,
butchering, but
exactly.
which
It's
is
like
when Christopher Nolan calls.
it's a Freudian slip that I barely got Leslie's name right. However, if you're on the studio side and the head of the DGA named Christopher Nolan calls you and asks for X, you're probably doing what he says. I think the most impacted person from this election is Donna Langley, who's the head of Universal, who's been
Mm.
releasing his last couple of films. Because if Chris Nolan calls you and asks for anything, you're probably going to be like, whatever you want, Chris. So I think that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the union members are hoping for that, especially with all of the rise of AI technology and how it's being used in film and already putting people out of work at kind of mass scales. The question is really is where does Christopher Nolan stand in all that? I mean, he's a long time advocate for using film in
Hmm.
a time where like the digital age took over 20 years ago. I mean, my dad was forced to put in digital projectors at the movie theaters back in the early 2000s. And Nolan's been one of those guys pushing for the art and pushing for shooting on film. But I mean, I could be wrong about this. Of all the things that he is known for, being a labor advocate is not one of those things. That's not to say that he's not. I just really don't know where he's going to fall on that. It's going to be interesting. Now, someone who is going to advocate super hard against the use of AI is the new president of SAG, which is Sean Astin.
Rudy, baby.
Rudy, freaking Samwise Gamgee. Sean is one of our most beloved actors and just known throughout Hollywood as one of the sweetest dudes. We're very, very excited to have him as the president of SAG. His whole thing is going to be about protecting the identities of actors, protecting their faces, their personhood, meaning that a studio can't just take a photo of you and put it wherever they want and make money
Mhm.
off of it for all due time. Sean Astin, although he's had a pretty successful career, he's also kind of a dude who's never really gotten his due for being like iconic part of not only just American cinema, but American culture and in some ways global culture. So he knows what it means to need your union. He's been one of those actors who, despite his success, has been staring down the barrel of not having had work for a little while, not
Yeah.
knowing how he's going to support his family, needing that health insurance that the union provides you, needing those residuals. So I think he's going to be a great advocate because he's seen it all. He's also going to advocate hard for bringing production back to LA. And another interesting thing about him is his mom was formerly the union president of SAG in the late 80s, which I thought
No
was cool.
way. That's
Yeah.
so cool.
So, yeah, I'm very excited for SAG in that way and excited for their new leadership.
Any star of Goonies is a friend of mine. I'll say that. All right, Max, that was a robust box office update. I think it's time for us to get into the main event. We're going to be talking about one battle after another. But first,
First,
I'm going to do a little history of the filmmaker Paul Thomas Anderson to kind of set the table.
okay, great, because I know nothing about him personally.
So, Paul Thomas Anderson, I think by many cinephile, movie-going people, he's considered one of the great living filmmakers. Definitely one of the top American filmmakers making movies right now. There's plenty of information out there. I do encourage you to just look up his own stuff, but this is just a helpful understanding of what led to this movie. He grew up in the Valley in Los Angeles.
I will say, I love the fact, like, knowing how many Oscar noms this guy's gotten. I love that he's homegrown LA, Hollywood his whole life.
And I think that is part of his persona, his personality. Grew up in the Valley. His dad was in the entertainment business. He was the voice of ABC in the 60s and 70s. So he kind of grew up in that world of entertainment. Cut to PTA in his late teens. He very famously, he went to NYU Film School and dropped out after 2 days. He
Does
tells a very
NYU still claim him as an alum, though?
if I were NYU, I probably would. But I encourage you to just Google it. He tells a great anecdote about his film professor making a derogatory comment about Terminator 2. And after PTA heard that, he dropped out and used his tuition to make his own first short film. It's called Coffee and Cigarettes. I'm embarrassed to say I have not seen it. It screened in '93 at the Sundance Film Festival and got some attention, raised some eyebrows. Oh, here's a new young filmmaker. Then cut to his next movie, which was his first feature length called Hard Eight, which was also lauded. Didn't win a bunch of awards, but it went to the Cannes Film Festival in 1995, I want to say. And he cast these great character actors that gave great performances and also discovered this one young talent named Philip Seymour Hoffman,
No kidding.
PTA's muse for the next several movies. So please look up more details because all these movies and stories have like much more rich text than I'm going to share here. But so Hard Eight, Cannes Film Festival, '95. People are like, oh, who's this young kid? I think he's like 22 at the time. And they're like, wow, that guy shows a lot of promise. I mentioned Max, he grew up in the Valley in the 60s and 70s. You know what was also a big part of the Valley of Los Angeles in the 60s and 70s?
As a guy who worked on a TV show in Chatsworth, California, that was right next to a sex toy factory, I do know exactly what was going on in the Valley.
That's right, Max. Porn. Especially in the late 60s and 70s. The Valley was the capital of the porn industry. And in the wake of this successful first feature of PTA, he wrote this script about the rise of the porn industry in the Valley in Los Angeles, where he's from, and ultimately the decline in the 80s. And it got the eye of a film executive, a suit essentially. Remember this guy's name. His name was Mike DeLuca. So Mike DeLuca is gaga over this script. And even though it's about sex, Mike DeLuca puts all his chips behind this young, unknown filmmaker and is like, I want to make this movie. Let's just go for it. And of course, that movie is called Boogie Nights. Boogie Nights is a seminal moment for me seeing that movie. I didn't know movies could do that. And that was mostly what got
the
the
movie when you saw the movie in theaters?
No, my dad didn't let me see it in theaters,
Okay.
but I think I saw it in like '98 on VHS, and I was just blown away. And I think that got the attention of not just the film community, but a lot of people. The way that Quentin Tarantino, there was success in Reservoir Dogs if you were like in the film community, and people were like, whoa, who's that? And then 2 years later, he comes out with Pulp Fiction, and then the whole world is like, "Whoa, who's that?" That is
Yeah.
kind of the progression of like Hard Eight to Boogie Nights. After
Yeah.
Boogie Nights, I think people really knew who this guy was,
Well, I
and
mean, the movie won a bunch of Oscars, didn't it? Or nominations at least?
got a bunch of nominations. After Boogie Nights, it does cement him as this young auteur, wonderkind American filmmaker. And then he then goes on in the next like 15, 20 years to just make some incredible movies. His next movie after Boogie Nights is a movie called Magnolia, probably my personal favorite. He makes movies with Adam Sandler, which nobody thought was a serious actor, called Punch Drunk Love.
I
He
love that
makes
movie.
It's incredible. Then he makes There Will Be Blood, a movie called Inherent Vice, The Master, Phantom Thread, Licorice Pizza. Max, what you had mentioned, like overall, he's gotten these great performances out of some unknown character actors and previously famous actors. He literally revived Burt Reynolds' career. In Magnolia, he gets a performance out of Tom Cruise, who at that time is one of the most famous actors in the world, but he gets a performance out of him that no one has ever seen before. He helps create Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah.
They work together for several movies.
I mean, like Philip Seymour Hoffman in Punch Drunk Love is like one of the scariest dudes. Like, and then Adam Sandler being, I mean, like he had this like explosive rage in him, but also like this timid, soft spoken guy, and like the dude from Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison, and he's in this dramatic role, and he falls in love with this woman. It's this really sweet love story. I don't know, he finds emotional territory that I think a lot of us just kind of never thought existed.
And another thing to mention is that what many movie fans and critics consider arguably the greatest performance in the 21st century is Daniel Day-Lewis playing Daniel Plainview in a movie called There Will Be Blood. If you have
Yeah.
not seen There Will Be Blood, please do so. So I think like that's a very quick and dirty synopsis of who he is. He's in the conversation with my movie friends Max Yu and others as at the level of Quentin Tarantino and Christopher Nolan and Bong Joon-ho, top auteur filmmakers that you'll go see anything that they see.
Yeah.
But I have found that he is more so than those others an incredibly personal filmmaker. He often takes on themes of having complicated relationships with the father figure, which he did growing up. Themes of like found family, of the people around you become the family that you support. A lot of American themes like greed and ambition and sex and religion and obsession. And after all of that and all those considerations, he has never won an Oscar. He's never won in the 30 years that he's been making movies. And nerds like me and you have been talking about him for 25 years. And I would go down the list of the films he's made as being without a miss.
Yeah, well, the other crazy thing is that he has been nominated so much. You go through that list of movies, Boogie Nights, Magnolia, There Will Be Blood. There Will Be Blood, tragically coming out at the same time as No Country for Old Men. Like that probably could have been his time, but there's so many of his movies that are not just like good enough to get awards, but like also the types of movies that people would give awards to, and then somehow just he hasn't won it. The whole awards thing is so crazy, but
And in addition, none of his movies have ever made over, I think the number $77 million.
but worldwide, you mean?
Worldwide.
Yeah.
It's the most that any of his movies never made. That is still no small feat. But for a guy that is often in conversations with a Christopher Nolan or a Quentin Tarantino, these guys have all made movies that have resonated and made $400 million. We just talked about Christopher Nolan earlier. His last movie made $1 billion.
Yeah.
And yet, I think a lot of people all consider him at that level with those other guys. And I think it's because he shares a bit of personalness. His movies feel more personal than a Christopher Nolan or a Bong or a David Fincher. And I wouldn't even say that I like PTA more than those other filmmakers. However, movies from Bong, movies from Fincher, movies from Nolan, they are great on thematics. Whereas all the movies that we just listed that PTA makes, there's always a kernel of that like kid from the valley. And I think that always really has resonated with me, even if they've not been mainstream movies.
Yeah, I do know what one little thing about PTA is that he's had like troubled relationships throughout his life. And to your point of him being a very personal filmmaker, I think what is so appealing about his movies is that there's not a single character in any of them that is wholly good or wholly bad. They just seem like very real people. who have very, like, real desires and real wants and real needs and real flaws and make real dumb choices and make real interesting choices or unexpected choices, and that, based on what little I know about who he is as a dude, makes a lot of sense where he is maybe holding up a mirror to himself or the people around him and being like, why do we do these things? Why do we hurt each other? Why do we show up for each other when we have no reason to?
Yeah, I agree. And I think in all his movies, no matter how serious they are, there is humor, even in unexpected moments.
Yeah.
And often stemming from someone's humanity and their flaws, like you said. Like PTA, because he grew up in that area, I think like a lot of his movies are like a little pervy, a little sexy, a little inappropriate.
Yeah. Or like licorice pizza and just being like massively inappropriate.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
the age gap between those 2 people, I think there's racism that's, like, right at the surface in those movies
yeah.
of some of the characters that he's exploring, and all of them, to your point, his characters are almost always idiosyncratic and exploring the person's flaws, even if you're rooting for them,
Yeah.
and I don't you don't always get that in a Bong Joon-ho movie or a David Fincher movie.
Or definitely not a Steven Spielberg movie.
Absolutely not a Steven Spielberg movie. That's a great
I mean, all hail Spielberg, but like, yeah, it's not really what you're getting when you show up for a Spielberg film.
There's none of the idealism that a filmmaker like Spielberg has, which
Yeah.
again, we all as American
But they're
audience
not
goers, I think
like
we
his
love.
movies aren't cynical either, and I think that's kind of the magic to them. Like they're not idealistic, they're not like pulling the blanket over your head. I mean, There Will Be Blood, like which is an extreme examination of like greed, where greed and capitalism become very destructive to like a culture or like the people around it. It doesn't seem like cynicism for cynicism's sake, you know what I mean?
I don't know. I would respectfully disagree in I think There Will Be Blood is like a great example of the dark heart of America and
Yeah.
American ambition. And also saying that like his movies do often reflect the time. That was in the middle of our one of our several wars in the Middle East when that movie was
Yeah.
developed and I think he was making a statement there. I think he both understands the dark heart of humanity and America. But I will agree, Max, that like he does somehow manage to balance it out, and I think have
Like Inherent Vice, like for me, it's like the darkness of the 70s really summed up in a film, but also like these characters having these weird funny interactions with one another, still trying to do right despite all that stuff. Like Inherent Vice was, I think, his most slept on movie, but I
yeah,
really like that movie.
yeah.
What's your best worst, not including One Battle, which we're about to talk about?
I think Magnolia was his third film. It was the film after Boogie Nights. And this guy we mentioned, Mike DeLuca, after the success of Boogie Nights, told PTA that he could do whatever he wanted. And he made a 3-hour movie with a huge cast of characters: Tom Cruise, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Julianne Moore, William H. Macy, so many other great actors. And I think at the time, people considered it swinging too hard. It was made at the time by a 29-year-old filmmaker who had never not succeeded. Um,
Wow.
so I think people don't love that movie and think it was a bit overtly ambitious. I still think I ride with that one. So I think that might be my
Yeah, I know
number
people who
one.
think who are like, "That's my favorite movie."
Yeah.
Like, not
Yeah.
my favorite PTA, my favorite movie. That's so I can't really answer favorite because truth is when I saw Boogie Nights, like I didn't fucking get it. Like it was one of those viewing experiences, and this is the same with There Will Be Blood, where I was watching it and I was like, I know that there's something here that's trying to be communicated to me, and I don't know what it is. And yeah, it just wasn't smart enough at the time. But now I really feel like I can understand those movies, and I'm very excited to go watch them. We're actually going to go see Boogie Nights at the Culver Theater, right? In
No, in
November.
November, guys, hit us up if you guys want to
Super
join.
jazzed. You should definitely come along. But I would say the worst one, because you wanted me to talk about the grumpiest movie, is Licorice Pizza. I fucking hated that movie. I didn't know why it was made or what it was trying to communicate with me. It was definitely a hang movie. That
Hmm.
said, there were like one or two scenes in that movie that absolutely blew my mind. And
Hmm.
that was like the Bradley Cooper scene and then the back in that truck down the hill and other
which
crazy
was which
shit.
was essentially an action sequence. Yeah.
Yeah.
All this lead up before our conversation because of the names of best filmmakers alive right now still making movies. I would not say that PTA is necessarily even my favorite, but there's something about his movies that I feel his history and his personality and his humanness more than a Fincher movie or a Bong Joon-ho movie or a Christopher Nolan movie. And I think that is a great lead up to the movie we're about to talk about. Max, please give us your 10-word synopsis of One Battle After Another.
Okay, my 10-word logline is: the federal government is fucking scary. Hide from them. Which is not a really great description of what the movie is or what happens in it, but that's about as close as I can get.
Dude, that's pretty good. I like that. And I like what this has turned into, which is like, what's your 10-word takeaway?
Yeah, or the vibe. How did it make you feel? All right, what's yours, Dave? What do you got?
I got two. I'm cheating a little bit. I'm going to give you two. My first one is one violent revolutionary plus one scared, confused tribalist equals America.
Hey, that's pretty good.
I like that.
That's pretty
Uh,
good.
but it is a little depressing. So the alt is thank goodness for the hope of the next generation.
Oh, that's great too. That's a good vibe.
Yeah, that's a little bit better vibe. This movie is a tough one to unpack, and I'm so thrilled to do it with you, Max. I'll just read the plot line that is out in the world. That is how it's been described online. When their evil enemy resurfaces after 16 years, a group of ex-revolutionaries unite to rescue one of their own's daughter.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that that's super accurate, but
Yeah.
it's not inaccurate.
So I think really briefly, just talking about the auspices to get it out of the way. I know we're doing a lot of table setting, but this was based on a book by Thomas Pynchon called Vineland. It's loosely based on it. They've made a lot of liberties. The original story was set in 1984 around Reagan's reelection about a group of 60s radicalists. PTA has taken that core story, but then updated it to be closer to modern times.
Kind of.
Kind of, yes. The cast is Leonardo DiCaprio, Teyana Taylor, Benicio del Toro, Sean Penn throwing 1,000 miles an hour. Also, getting less love in the marketing, and I think what you've seen, but like Regina Hall is in this movie and is incredible.
Yeah, crushes.
And this young, amazing ingenue actress named Chase Infinity.
Who has the coolest name in Hollywood now and is required to be a movie star.
Max, you also noted here, like Colleen Atwood is a costume designer. I didn't know this,
Yeah.
but 4-time Oscar winner.
Yeah, I wanted to give her a special shout out. She's like the person who did all the Tim Burton movies. She also did Chicago and Silence of the Lambs, one of the most iconic people in filmmaking. And she did the costumes on this, which is hilarious because Leonardo DiCaprio is like around his underwear for half the movie. And it's a very interesting choice from the person who did Sleepy Hollow and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and stuff like that. So anyhow.
This is the biggest budget that Paul Thomas Anderson has ever been given by far. The budget has been rumored to be about $150 million, which is above and beyond what he's ever done in the past. Partially is that he is paying the biggest movie star in the world, Leonardo DiCaprio, which his rate is typically $25 million. Also mentioning the same guy that greenlit Boogie Nights, Mike DeLuca, who, again, look his career up. He's got an incredible career of movie making. After the success of that movie, I think 28 years later, he's the same guy that said to Paul Thomas Anderson, yes, here's $150 million. Go make your most mainstream movie that you ever made, please.
Also the same guy who gave $90 million to Ryan Coogler, right?
Exactly. And said yes to Zach Kreger to make Weapons, him and his working partner, Pam Abdi. So Mike and Pam are just legends in our books as far as great taste and taking big risks. So Max, what marketing did you see?
Okay, so the marketing I saw a couple posters, which was Leo in a robe holding a gun, looking kind of haggard, which didn't really hook me. Then I saw the trailers, and the trailers didn't hook me, but they did not hook me. And I think it took me a couple of views before I knew what the movie was about.
Mm-hmm.
And that it was about him looking for his daughter. It might have taken the second trailer to be released. I could tell that it was seeming to satirize like left-wing extremist political views, which kind of irked me because like the type of left-wing radical groups they're talking about have not been in existence since the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And at a time where, left-wing political movements have been crushed and right-wing political power is like very strong, it seemed like a weird choice. But I also was like, it's PTA. Like I'm trusting in him. I don't know what the comedy is going to be. It was also pretty clear that they were going to be criticizing like right-wing political views as well. So I was like, okay, like I'm going to go see this movie, but I really don't know what I'm in for. And like not in a good way. Like I wasn't leaning in, I wasn't curious. I wasn't like, my God, how is he going to find this daughter? Who took his daughter? And all those like questions that make you want to go see a movie, like the way Weapons way just be like, who are these kids? What happened to them? What's going to happen to this town? I was just like, hey, it's a Paul Thomas Anderson movie. Like, so I think the trailer just didn't quite work, and that was pretty much the bulk of the marketing that I saw. Dave, I mean, what did you see?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this campaign. Warner Brothers, again, they just released Sinners and Weapons this year, as well as many other successful films. They're actually on
Yeah,
one of the all-time historic success stories of the last 7 of their movies, all opening up to over $40 million. So an incredibly talented marketing department. My guess is that there were 2 trailers, as you mentioned, Max. The first trailer, I think Paul Thomas Anderson maybe actually cut it himself. Now, that's
mm,
very rare to have filmmakers actually allow to cut the marketing materials. And it's a list of, I think, 2 people are really allowed to do it. David Fincher is one of them, and PTA, I think, is allowed to do it. The first trailer was, I think, a more accurate reflection of PTA's type of movies: ensemble characters, idiosyncratic, kind of funny, but if you're trying to make it very commercial and get a lot of people to see it, which again, because of $150 million budgets,
yeah,
this
pretty
movie needs
important.
to do, it was very quirky and fits into PTA's type of storytelling, which is not, again, historically commercial. Then the second trailer has a Beyonce cue in it. So that felt to me from the outside like a clear course correction in their marketing, which is, we're going to put a Beyonce cue in it, and we're going to put the father daughter storyline in the forefront, which
Yeah.
is one of the most universal narratives to try to make it more comprehensible to average moviegoer. But Max, to your point, Leo is not looking like his traditional self in the movie marketing materials. He has a handlebar mustache. He's oftentimes seeing comparisons to the dude in The Big Lebowski, and it's not what I picture a $25 million worth movie star to look like.
I mean, huge ups to the hair and makeup team because it was perfect for this
Great for the
character.
movie.
But I think for me, what's marketable in this film? Leonardo DiCaprio, absolutely. Teyana Taylor, yes, like very popular musician, a pretty solid social media presence. Like she's really pretty. Benicio
Mhm.
del Toro, like always just excellent in everything he shows up. Regina Hall, like could have used more of her face in the trailer. Sean Penn, is he marketable? He's been
Yeah,
gone a while. I'm not sure. And then like Chase Infinity, just not in the trailer, just
yeah,
not there. Like the young person, Leonardo DiCaprio's old
yeah.
now. You always need young people going to the movies and participating in art. And like the one young person we have in this movie who's awesome in a film of standouts is just not in it at all.
I will say
And
though, in my particular social media feed, I did see Leonardo DiCaprio and Chase Infinity going to movie theaters, saying charming things. That I will also note is rare for Leo. Leo doesn't typically do a TikTok spot.
yeah,
And for whatever reason, maybe because Warner Brothers begged, he was
yeah, well,
willing
I
to
think the
participate
tracking
in
was
that.
not strong.
Maybe exactly because.
Yeah, I think they missed a really big opportunity here because this movie is essentially just a chase film and it has an awesome villain. I feel like just market the chase. I mean, the classic Dave Weaver, man. Like, let's lie to them about what this movie is. This movie's just about this guy looking for this daughter up against this guy. And then when we show up, it's much weirder and much more different, and that makes it more exhilarating. And I feel like they did the opposite. They're like, look at this fucking weird movie with this big movie star. Weird, weird, weird. And we're like, what the hell are we watching? And then we got there and like, oh, it's actually a chase film. And I'm like, that's a weird choice. I feel like there's a version of marketing out here that we could have convinced more people to show up.
Okay, Max, we talked about marketing.
Yeah,
Putting that aside for a moment, because I think there's a big conversation to have about that. But
sure.
putting all that out, Max, you saw the movie. What did you think of One Battle After Another?
I fucking loved it, dude. I loved it. And me and my buddy both saw it with our dads, which was an interesting experience.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really cool. And our dads were alive when the 60s radicals, when all that stuff was going down, and they really understood the humor of it. I walked out of it afterwards, and my buddy's dad was just laughing and shaking his head, just delighted. But what he kept saying was so weird. So weird. And that's the thing that's really crazy about this is like at its core, this movie's pretty simple. It's a man looking for his daughter, right? It's a
Hmm.
very, very universal, but like the way that we got there and who it was looking for whose daughter and who it was chasing them were these very, very strange, eclectic characters. And as a result, the journey that we go on felt both familiar and brand new emotionally. Like I was thrilled. I was at the edge of my seat at times. I was laughing at times. I didn't know what was going to happen next or how they were going to get out of these problems. The problems kept getting more and more difficult to solve. But by the time the final few frames of the movie rolled through, I was left with this feeling, this like exhilaration and this satisfaction and this confusion about what exactly I was rooting for. I didn't even know because there's so many weird politics wrapped up in this whole thing, too. So it's a movie that is thrilling and it will also give you an emotion that's kind of new and that's very exciting and very fun.
I don't we're not gonna purposely go through the plot of the movie on this, but we might mention plot points. So, spoiler alert for this
Yeah.
movie. I also love the movie Max. It really stuck with me. I think there are some topics to unpack here. So, if you haven't seen it, stop now, go see it, and get back for us to dive more into it. I think one of the reasons, Max, I wanted to do that PTA deep dive to kind of set the table is that I thought this movie was, to your point, more political than the marketing wanted to show, even though it showed some politics.
Yeah.
Um, but you opened in the movie and immediately you realize it's going to have a political point of view. And also, at the same time, one of the most personal movies that I ever saw.
So make your argument here because I have a lot of strange thoughts about the politics as a very political person and as a dude who is very interested in the history that this is examining specifically. But what to you about this makes it a personal story for PTA?
So, again, spoilers for the film. The opening frames showing one of our many heroes, and you realize very early on that though the movie is sold on Leo, there's a huge cast of characters.
Yeah.
But early on, you see Tayana Taylor walking in front of essentially an internment camp on the border of Mexico and the United States. And that, has happened historically in America over the last 100 years, and it happened a couple of years ago. Um,
It's happening
so
right now.
and it's happening right now. So it's very clearly opening up and realizing like, oh, we're going to get into some politics and have a point of view on it. But then cutting to the very end of the film and you see how the relationship between Leonardo DiCaprio's character and Chase Infinity's character has grown and evolved, and ultimately the the movie ends on a feeling of hope for the next generation, even though the previous generation, the Leo generation, is essentially maybe past its time. And
Or even admittedly fucked it up.
yeah, and tried to make change and didn't really make the change that he wanted. But I think if you dive a little deeper into Paul Thomas Anderson's personal life, Paul Thomas Anderson's partner for the last several decades has been Maya Rudolph. Maya Rudolph is of mixed race, and Paul and Maya have had mixed race children, and three of them are girls, and all girls in their teens or preteens.
Right.
And I think in that regard, Paul is a cipher in a lot of his movies, and though maybe not quite as bumbling as the Leo DiCaprio Bob, I think it's him sharing that feeling of fecklessness and inability to make the change that I think we all maybe hope we do in our more ambitious stages in our lives, in our 20s, in our 30s. And the realization that, hey, we weren't as good as we wanted it to be. We weren't as bold as we maybe should have been, but maybe there's hope for someone else to do it. And I think that continued hope is both naive, but something that we need.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So in that regard, I think I see a lot of I am not a dad, Max, you're not a dad, but I think I see a lot of that hope for the next generation, despite all the negativity that is part of our country and our world.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of very pointed things that he says about possibly his own fatherhood here, which is once Will is a teenager and Bob has been taking care of her for a while, he comes home drunk and she's like, I don't want to have to take care of you. And the friends show up and he acts super weird. He clearly loves her more than anything. He's like clearly doing a bad job. I don't know if PTA is doing a bad job as a father, but if your assertion is right and this film is very personal, maybe he's looking at his own flaws and being like, oh man, I fucked that up, I fucked that up, I fucked that up.
Hmm.
But then something happens to his daughter and he does everything he possibly can to get her back. Like literally, that's what this movie's about. This guy does everything he possibly can. He's putting his daughter first, even though he is who he is. And at times, he's a bumbling idiot, and at times, he's a very, very good dad. And maybe there's some self-reflection there, like, oh, I'm kind of a bumbling idiot, I'm not as cool as you might think I am being a Hollywood director,
Yeah.
but I will fucking put it on the line for my kids. And also his particular fears in this time might be reflected because of having mixed race daughters at a time where they're taking racial history out of history books, they're taking it out of museums, they're firing people from their jobs who went through diversity programs or even didn't, who just happened to be black in the military. Yeah, it's weird because this movie was shot before the election.
Yeah.
So it's also like, are we projecting a little bit of our own time on this? But also, these things keep repeating in American history.
I think you also bring up an interesting point, and the word I keep saying on this pod is Paul Thomas Anderson and personal, and he's a very personal director, but he's not above hyperbole. Like
Yes.
people are also kind of ludicrous, and I think along with Quentin Tarantino, feel this like this odd mix of like you can do something personal and heartfelt, but also things that are just like clearly exaggerated and kind of crazy. Like the villains in this film are part of what's the
The Merry Christmas Club or
yeah.
something. The Christmas Adventure Club. It's just like,
And there are some just absolutely silly choices. A movie that's part of this DNA is the Doctor Strangelove. So there's absurdity in this that PTA is not above, and yet at the same time, and the same way that Bob, our hero, is just a moron at times, but
yeah.
ultimately what he's trying to do is still so resonant for myself, who doesn't even have a daughter. So I think the way that he is able to balance tones that you wouldn't think should work in the movie together just really worked on me.
Yeah, we talked about that as well. Like, how do these tones work together? They have absolutely no business working together at all. I mean, to your point about hyperbole, like, we don't live in subtle times.
Mhm.
And we also don't live in a time where, like, people understand subtle messaging. So the value of hyperbole to get a point across makes a lot of sense.
There's just so much, Max, to unpack in this movie. You love it. I love it. We are deep in spoilers. I think we're going to be talking about it for weeks on end.
For sure.
But focusing on the craft, which we already talked a little bit about, just going through the performances. Again, it's just a murderer's row of great actors doing amazing things. We talked about Leo, considered the biggest movie star in the world. And here he is doing pratfalls and stuttering and smoking a lot of weed.
Yeah, just
And he
seeming
was
like
great.
a loser and a buffoon. I think there's actually a lot of courage in being one of the biggest movie stars in the world and making yourself seem that way. Because, like, think about it. Like, fucking Tom Cruise doesn't do that. It's such a hallmark of being a movie star is you got to maintain your brand as a cool guy. And Leonardo DiCaprio in this movie is doing everything he can to not seem cool.
Leo has been on a kick of being a leading man, but wanting to play more interesting, not leading man characters. We talked about Chris Nolan earlier. Inception, where Leo is handsome in a suit, looking suave, kind of
Yeah.
James Bond. That movie is 15 years old.
Yeah.
More lately, he was in Killers of the Flower Moon, where he had like nasty teeth and a weird accent and was kind of dumb.
He was
He was
super dumb in that movie. That was the
he
whole
was in
point.
Totally. He was in Don't Look Up, where he was like a nerdy, nervous scientist. So it's definitely been something that he's wanted to explore the last several movies. And in this, I think, inarguably gives just an incredible performance, both heartfelt, but also I laughed so hard at some of his lines,
Yeah, and
Max.
I'm also like I do not want this guy to be my dad, but I'm also like I'm so glad that the dads like this are out there. Benicio del Toro was my favorite part of this movie. There's this whole sequence where we find out that Benicio has his own underground thing going on, this own anti-government thing going on, and he's essentially the center of a community that's trying to help out immigrants. And the moment where everything he's worked for his whole life is at risk and his freedom is at risk, there's just this look on his face where he goes, I know I have to play it cool and I have to be the solid person here because people are looking to me for leadership. But very like short distance underneath that is just this horrible fear that his family is going to be torn apart, his community is going to be torn apart, all these people who are relying on him are going to be harmed, and he just like pulls his shit together, does everything he can for everyone around him to be okay, and he's the last person to be okay, and he like makes this sacrifice, and he's fucking funny while he does it. It's phenomenal.
I agree. He's typically been known as an actor who can do big, over the top, sometimes goofy, sometimes comic performances. Again, to your point, Max, like I also laughed at a lot of Benicio's moments in this film, but in general, it was an interesting subversion of the normal, where it's like the normal is like your leading man is the stoic, strong jawed, I'm going to get it done guy. And
Yeah.
then the sidekick is the goofy, funny one. And in this particular thing, Leo very much is the goofier, quirkier, doesn't have it all together guy.
Yeah, it's also like a great contrast to the Hollywood trope, which is that the stoic, badass, cool guy is always like the white guy, and like the
Mhm.
goofy sidekick is like black or gay or like whatever.
Yeah, and other in some way, you're right.
Yeah, it's totally subverted here.
And he's
It,
the one that ultimately, like, makes the biggest sacrifices of it all. Sean Penn, it's been 10 or 15 years since he's taken a role this interesting, plays just an incredible villain. There's a lot of hyperbole in this, and I think it's no more evident than this character of General
Lockjaw.
Lockjaw is his
Yeah,
name, I think.
there's some silly names in this movie for sure.
It's hard to encapsulate how both terrifying and goofy this villain is.
Yeah, I'm gonna say some other cast members that I love. Like we mentioned Regina Hall earlier, who's normally like in a lot of comedies, just showing up and showing some deep emotion. I thought her performance was remarkable. Tayana Taylor, like a really thankless performance. Like she's kind of a villain in this movie in a very, very big way. She's self interested, selfish, betrays her friends, fucks up the movement in a lot of ways. And
She really carries the movie for the first 20 to 30 minutes of it, and other smaller performances throughout that PTA just has this knack for getting great faces, great small performances.
yeah.
I think the cinematography so beautiful, and back to this theme of personal. The film takes place in California, and I think for being such an American movie, the topography is so specific of the West, and one that Paul Thomas Anderson is very familiar to himself.
Yeah, I also thought what was really remarkable about the cinematography was how unremarkable the coloring was in this film. Like so much of modern film seems almost magical light everywhere and the prettiest shot that you could see. And this movie was just like looked like raw footage.
Yeah,
And it felt very real that way. But what they where they made up for it in craft, I think, was how kinetic it was. The way the movement of this film was really remarkable. PTA's worked with a lot of really great all-star dudes, but he's taken a turn in these last two movies to a kind of a more realistic turn and even the visual aspect of his movies, which I thought was cool.
really interesting. Also worth mentioning, there were multiple car chase scenes. This is not your Michael Bay Fast and the Furious, very glossy car chase. These are car chases where the camera feels like you're in the seat next to it. It's very jarring at times. Culminating in a third act car chase scene is both very realistic and yet something I've never seen before.
Yeah, yeah, there's no spectacle here. It's not Michael Bay, it's not a Fast and the Furious movie. It's like you can be in a car chase like this in your life, and that's what felt so unnerving about it. The other thing that felt so incredibly unnerving was the score.
It's Johnny Greenwood, right?
It just felt like he was just a dude sitting at a piano hitting one note over and over and over again for like 30 minutes. And that sounds horrible, but it was so gripping and almost like you're trying to catch your own breath as Leo is trying to catch his breath while he's on the run trying to get to his daughter. Oh man, I thought the score was so good in this.
Another PTA trope that has been part of all his movies is his needle drops. In all his movies, he finds a couple of moments to play a familiar pop song
Yeah.
or a very obscure pop song, and there are fewer in this one than in some of his previous films. But for me, they really hit, including the very last cue. We're deep in spoilers, and I'll just say, like, hitting Tom Petty, "American Girl," for me really hit the moment where Chase Infinity goes off to hopefully embody the future of America that we can only hope for now.
Yeah. Well said. And on that note, like it's probably time to talk about politics. Right?
I think so, Max. I can't wait to hear what you think.
Yeah, so I'm a very political person. I won't get into my own personal views here in this podcast because it's not what we're here for. But I was, like I said, when I saw the trailer, I was kind of like, oh boy, like how is this going to be handled? And the thing about the political groups that they're talking about in this film, the ones who like bomb buildings and who rob banks, these are things that happened in radical left wing groups in the 1970s. Like, it's
Mhm.
kind of crazy that we don't talk about this, but there were like 70,000 bombings in the United States between 1970 and 1980. A lot of them were executed by what started as left wing radical groups and then just became like almost cult-like groups that just robbed banks for money in order to sustain themselves,
Hmm.
which is hinted at here. Because when the political group falls apart in the first act, it happens with a bank robbery. You're kind of like, what does this have to do with freeing immigrants, which is kind of the thing that they started out doing? Things get out of hand, somebody gets killed.
Yeah.
And it was also, I think, a very strong choice to make the person that get killed be a black security guard because they're supposed to
Hmm.
be a racially radical group that is all about liberation and blah blah blah. Who do they kill? They kill a black dude. So
Yeah.
I think all that seemed very intentional. But the thing with those types of left wing radical movements is that they were pretty much extinct in the 1980s. You don't see groups of left wing radicals running around with guns, kidnapping people, ransoming people, robbing banks, or anything like that. Like left wing politics over the last 20 years has been defined by like the Obama era generation on social media and like
Yeah.
getting people out to vote, and then by the protests or the riots of the COVID era. I mean, we saw some bad stuff like the Rittenhouse stuff. There were armed people out there,
Hmm.
but it was not like an organized militia in the sense
Hmm.
where you do see organized militias now is on the right. And we've been seeing that since the 1980s when the right started to radicalize. So it was interesting to have like a left wing radical movement in this movie because it seems anachronistic. And I would say that like the real enemy of this movie is the federal government. And I wouldn't even necessarily say a right wing federal government, although that's like clearly the case in this movie. But that's also not to say that like this movie excuses left wing radical acts of terrorism. I think the scene of the bank robbery is a lot different than the Latina Harriet Tubman situation, right? Because when Perfidia kills an innocent guard at a
Hmm.
bank robbery, there's nothing really political about that. It just seems like an organization that's out of control. And it's also in stark contrast to when they raided the immigration camp and tied people up and didn't kill anyone.
Hmm. Yeah.
And Leonardo DiCaprio several times, as Bob Ferguson says, me and my mom used to run around. We used to do some bad shit, not
Yeah.
good stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not, I don't think there's anything about this movie that is saying left wing radical politics is good. And to your point, with the way the movie ends, it's saying the dream that we had might have been the right dream, but it was not executed well.
Yeah.
Where it is executed well, I think, is with Sensei's character, with the Benicio del Toro character, trying to hold his community together. You might feel one way or another about immigration, but it's hard to argue that this is not a man trying to do good about people that are important to him.
Totally agree. I will say, Max, to your point, this movie was shot before the election, but I do think this moment, especially post Charlie Kirk, I think in the last year there has been an uptick in violence, and I do think PTA's makes the exact point that you did, which is just, that is not a good direction to go ultimately.
Right,
um,
right. I mean, I would say I don't know who was saying that political violence hasn't been increasing, but if you look objectively about what's happening in our country, I am surprised at like the sudden shock that people have that there's violence in this country. We've been living with it for a long time. But as far as this movie goes, it's really showing that the federal government is corrupt. And it's showing that us through the lens of Lockjaw's hypocrisy, right? His whole goal in life is to join this like secret organization that promotes, you know,
white supremacy. Yeah.
white supremacy,
Yeah.
but like calling it American culture, which is why calling it the Christmas Adventure Club is so like special, I think. But he has his like sexual perversions and his obsession with black women. And he doesn't actually embody any of those ideals. You know, he hires Mexican bounty hunters, mixed race bounty hunter, or whatever you want to call it, to kidnap people in foreign countries. He's not even
Yeah.
on US soil. He's going after innocent kids, including his own kid. And they even plant violent agitators in a protest.
One of the most insidious moments is that at the same time I do think the villain is so interesting because it is both like harrowing, like that moment where you feel like, oh my gosh, that's real, and
Yeah.
then naming the villains Colonel Lockjaw and
Yeah.
the Christmas, like to me it balanced the absurdity with the real fear that I feel like many of us live in now in America. But I will say it could be easy for you and I, Max, to agree with this because I think you and I both lean politically in a similar direction, and we don't want this podcast to be too political, but I think the fact that the villain, that side of the story, doesn't have anyone that's truly redeemable, versus our hero side, where Leo is an idiot. He's ultimately someone that we root for. Same with Benicio del Toro, Regina
Yeah.
Hall. Whereas, like, I don't know if there's anyone on that side. I think PTA is purposely taking a stand where, like, he is not for them.
Yes, definitely. But what is he for then? Like, what does this movie say about what are like the politics that we are supposed to root for at the end of the day? Because it's not the French 76. You could arguably say that this whole political argument is about immigration, maybe, but you have a racially diverse side fighting like a white supremacy side, so that's not really left wing versus right wing in the traditional sense. Left wing versus right wing is supposed to be an argument about government involvement, the size of the government, how we're taxed, government programs versus private business.
Yeah.
But the real politics of this movie are there is there a seat at the table in America for everybody or is there not? And the Sean Penn and the Christmas Society are like, we think a very small amount of people should rule America, and the other side is just against that. I don't think there's really political arguments here. There's kind of it's more about humanism, I think, than politics.
I do think PTA, he portrays the villain with characters that I think read very recognizable to a certain side. Maybe that's me being more of a liberal persuasion, like putting my own baggage onto that. Maybe that doesn't exist.
I mean, I
But
did. I was asking myself the entire time, like, yeah, I mean, it's not a right wing movie.
yeah,
It's definitely not. But like, I don't really know how left wing this movie is. I don't think it's a very radical statement, like anything that's happening in here. Sensei, it's a dude just really trying to hold his community and his family together and himself putting it on the line.
hmm
And
yeah.
I think that's the strongest statement of the film. So I don't know where that falls on the politics of what we're saying here, other than that it sounds like PTA is making a strong case for the human reason for living in a diverse society. And when you start to create what would it be called, like narratives of racial purity, like you're bound to encounter hypocrisy, and in order to avoid that hypocrisy you're probably going to try and protect it in a very violent way, which is what we see with all these movements all throughout history. So
Well said. Overall, I was particularly moved by the end of this long journey, which we haven't even mentioned that the movie is 2 hours and 40 minutes.
didn't feel like it, right?
Agreed. Agreed. It feels so propulsive. You
Yeah.
definitely don't feel it. But at the end of this long journey, I think what I was left with was the fact that Chase Infinity, Bob's daughter, Willa, is the daughter of Teyana Taylor's character, who's a violent revolutionary, of she's black, and of Sean Penn, whose character, who is white and scared and doing everything to quote unquote get back his purity and ultimately is lost to that, but believes that he himself is also doing the right thing, but is ultimately, I think, very confused.
Yeah.
And that though that is her biological parents, she is raised by a found family member, again, another PTA tie,
Yeah.
and is
Dude,
left.
one of the coolest parts about it is like they don't even talk about it because they don't care that much, because it's like, you're my daughter, that's it, end of story. You're my dad, that's it, end of story.
And I think that last action of, as sad as it is, that Bob goes back to smoking roaches and is going to be on the couch. I taking from that at some point your time is past and he's resigned to live with the mistakes that he's made, but the hope of a next generation to push for change and push for a better country, for a better world, I think to me embody that both political but personal statement, and ultimately gave me hope and got me emotional,
Yeah,
got me at the end,
it
man.
really got me too. And like the needle drop helped in a big way.
Yeah.
But also him saying one battle after another just mean we have to keep fighting, we have to keep fighting, we have to keep fighting, we have to keep fighting. And it never ends. It never
And
ends.
embodied by Max, by your great encapsulation of like the story this is based on 70s extremists, and
Yeah.
we've all as a country have gone through this push pull and tension, and it feels particularly bad right now in
Yeah.
2025. It feels really
It's really
hard
bad.
and scary, but I think that sharing that perspective with this film, that like we've been through this before, it is bad. There's some serious shit that we're going through, but that there is always hope with the next generation, and I think to push for that. Again, like you said, we have our own political views. We really want this podcast to be open to all people, but I think it was interesting to hear our perspectives on history and on where this movie comes out on it. Where do you think and how do you think it affected the box office?
I think, like I said earlier, I think this movie suffered by just not marketing the story, the chase.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a bummer. You know, we had $22 million opening, which is actually pretty good. This movie's just crazy expensive.
You're asking the question that literally splits me right down the middle, Max. As a cinephile, you and I both believe like give great players great plays. So give the great filmmakers of our time as much money as they say they need. As a marketer, yeah, man, I wish it was less because I wish the pressure was less. Now, still on the long view, I think this movie is going to play for a very long time. I think it will absolutely be an Oscar consideration. But for Warner Brothers, I think everyone's sweating a little over there about it making 22.4 domestically, 45 internationally opening week.
What
It's
do
a
you think it
lot.
needs to make to break even? What do you think it needs to gross?
If we're saying the production budget was, call it $150 million total, probably $70 million for a marketing budget. So 220, you probably need to make 250 to like break even and 300 for it to be considered a success.
I think you got to make more than 250 to break even on that, dude. Like a lot more than 250.
But that includes some ancillary downstream things, which is like something that
Yeah,
like even me working at a studio at one point, you don't really have a great view of like what
sure,
the deal is with when somebody's buying it at home for $20 each.
sure.
The deal is to put it on an airplane in a couple months. But I think overall, again, going back to the person that greenlit the movie, the guy Mike DeLuca, old friends with Paul Thomas Anderson and Pam Abdi, I think for their particular situation, which is the last 7 movies they released were huge hits. And then this movie, taking box office out of it, likely to be considered a best picture. They should view this as another crowning achievement. From a cinephile's perspective, I couldn't say enough great things about the run that they did. But for this specific movie in isolation, yeah, I think it's going to be tough in the short term. But to Max, Boogie Nights from many years ago, and There Will Be Blood from many years ago, like in the moment, did they make incredible amounts of money? Not hugely, but like the amount of people that are still watching There Will Be Blood to this day versus the person that's watching, I don't know, the Fantastic Four movie that starred Miles Teller from 2014.
Right.
Like no one's renting that
No.
anymore. Whereas like PTA movies and this movie will be a movie that people will download and talk about for the next 5, 10. I think for a real long
Probably.
time.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I think this is going to have long legs. I don't know if it's going to have powerful legs. I think it's going to get a surge in the beginning months of the year when generally movie studios dump really crappy films that we didn't want to go see in December, and people were like, "Oh, well, this." One battle after another is going to get a bunch of Oscar noms. Maybe it's my time to go see that movie. I don't know if it's going to have like a Sinners run or anything like that, but I think there's a lot more money for this movie to be made. And I think you're totally right. Like, if we're talking about was this movie successful, it's definitely going to get a lot of awards noms. It definitely has entered the cultural conversation in a way that movies kind of haven't, and largely because of the politics and because it's so good.
Mm-hmm.
The letterbox reviews, they're off the charts. It's like a 4.5, like several 100,000 reviews. So people are excited about this movie. And I think that's going to drive more people to it. And it's also going to keep it as part of our cultural conversation, particularly with what's going on. It should interest people who are not normally going to go see a movie like this to go see a movie like this. So its cultural success is huge. And I think that's going to last a long time, largely because of the history stuff we just discussed. And I think it's going to enter an American lexicon. Like, it's going to be, I think more so than a lot of his other movies, probably one of the ones that's talked about for a very long time because it is so accessible and it does really reflect American culture, although in a hyperbolic way, like in a very real way. And my super hot take is that
Love that we're into hot takes. All right, see, yeah, give me the hot take.
my hot take is that that one battle after another is going to be more culturally successful and more culturally relevant than Superman by March of next year. And 5 years from now, it's not even going to be close.
Oh, I love that. I totally agree.
Yeah.
I got 2 hot takes. My 2 hot takes. My first hot take is this is a great year for movies. Maybe this is not that hot of a take, but great for self-reflective films about America. Content like this, content like Sinners, which is about American ambition, movies like Weapons, which subtly having commentary on our weapons in this country and how we use that. Also, movies like Eddington, which have a real scathing review of what America is. And also a TV show. We don't talk about TV shows here, but a TV show like Andor that also talks about
Big
the
time.
development of a revolution over time in the midst of a fascist like government.
Yeah, what it's really like to live under that kind of fascist government.
Exactly, and how a revolution comes together. I think all these movies and that TV show are an interesting conversation about where we are right now in America. And I think we'll look back at 2025 and say, dang, we got some great content about where we were in society at that point. And it's only October.
I mean, Wicked talks about this shit. Like
Yeah, it's very much in the content that we're seeing out there, and I think it's awesome. My one other hot take, and again, this is being so pro this movie, but Max, you hit it on earlier. Leonardo DiCaprio got paid $25 million for this movie. The movie opened domestically to less than his salary. If you were looking at his last couple of movies, which again, Max and I couldn't support an artist to do more interesting roles, like a Martin Scorsese movie in Killers of the Flower Moon, a movie like Don't Look Up, which is a commentary on climate change, and this movie itself. But if you're a studio head greenlighting the next movie and you're trying to put the biggest filmmaker in the center of it, and he is not able to help the movie get back its opening box office to his own salary, I would maybe start to push back on his reps and be like,
yeah.
not that he should be making no money, but like, hey, Leo, you had a handlebar mustache in the last movie and jacked teeth in a Killers of a Flower Moon. Maybe we're going to give you $18 million. Now that could
sounds pretty generous to me, Dave. Like
that could really piss off his reps. But I wonder if this is an apex point for Leo and his payday. And I hope he continues to take interesting roles, but I don't know if you're a studio head if you'd want to pay full freight anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think his rate's got to go down, but that's fine. Like how many movies did he make getting paid $25 million a movie?
I'm not worried for his own well-being.
Yeah. So like, if I'm Leo, just be like, do the Tom Brady thing, man. Take all the pay cuts in the world so you could have the best team in football for as long as you're playing football. And, if you want to make the best movies out there, which you clearly do, think a little bit about this like long term and be like, if I want to keep making movies like this, and I think a $20 million opening says a lot about Leo's star power and how it does still exist. But if you're measuring that against $150 million budget, I hope he learns a lesson from this, which I got to be more of a team player here.
I'm interested to see if he'll evolve with this and still pick great roles and do interesting stuff. But I wonder if he'll evolve or if he'll still demand that freight. Well, and it'll be interesting to see.
I do think for the health of movies, I think we need more Tom Brady quarterbacks at the helm here, taking pay cuts and like just trying to make the best movie possible. But we'll see what happens.
All right, Max, this is just the funnest conversation. I feel like we'll still be talking about this for many weeks to come.
There's so much to talk about with this movie. It's such an interesting film.
Max, like, what's next on your list?
I'm so jazzed with this. I'm going to see Avatar: Way of the Water in IMAX.
Whoa.
And I missed it the first time around.
Oh, that's great.
And I hear it's very boring, but I'm super jazzed to go do it. I'm going to see it on Monday. I'm also going to see Bone Lake this weekend, which is something we didn't even talk about in our fall preview. And then I got a screening. Like I said, my friends are the filmmakers behind Black Phone 2, and I'm going to go see that at Beyond Fest as well. So I got a bunch of stuff in my pocket. I got to prep. I got to get ready for the third Avatar movie to come out, and I didn't see the second, so that's first on the list.
That's great. Yeah, we're going to definitely be doing some Cameron love in the weeks to come. I'm just going to see this movie called The Smashing Machine, which stars Dwayne The Rock Johnson, Emily Blunt. It's directed by one of the Safdie brothers who did movies like Uncut Gems and Good Time, and probably going to see One Battle After Another one more time in theaters. So.
All right, Dave. Well, it sounds like we got a lot going on for us in this next week, so I'll see you at the movies, my brother.